No slides?
No signs. I've got a
Good.
couple of
Perfect. Okay.
programs.
Well, I've taken them down off their sugar highs. So they're welcome.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Brent Parker, and I've been a member of SIRH since 2022. My main motivation for joining was to keep track of my hockey book collection and to get input for a book I'm putting together about my dad. My wife and I live 85 miles due north as a seagull flies in Madeira Park, BC. My dad was a basketball all-star in high school, a hockey star on the ice, and like most good hockey players, he spent his summers stealing bases and chasing baseballs, amongst other things. Robert Lloyd Parker was born March 10th, 1938 in Summerland at the same hospital his three brothers and two sons would be born. The next day, March 11th, Hitler invaded Austria. Bob was 13 years old when Penticton's Memorial Arena and Summerland's Jubilee Arena both opened in '51. Penticton's Arena had an ice plant put in when it was built, and the senior AAA Penticton Vs. Jubilee Arena didn't have an ice plant until 1955. It had the senior AA or intermediate Summerland Max. By the way, the V's moniker does not stand for victory, as many people may have thought. It stands for a variety of locally grown peaches, the Vedette, the Valiant, and the Veteran. Max are apples. In the 53-54 season, there was no consistent sheet of ice in Summerland due to a mild winter. When Bob was 15, he walked along the Highway 97 for 2 hours from his home in Trout Creek to the arena in Penticton to practice. In the early 50s, moms and pops didn't drive their kids to early morning hockey practice. If you wanted to play, then you had to get there yourself. Bob gave himself enough time to walk to practice, and sometimes he was picked up and hitched a ride to the rink. And if he was there early enough, he would have the whole sheet of ice to himself. Next year, Bob got his driver's license and continued playing in Penticton for the 1954-55 season with the Penticton BCD's juvenile team. The BCDs played in the Penticton Commercial Hockey League. Bill Warwick was a star of the Penticton Bees and would sometimes be a guest coach of the BCDs. Bill Warwick and the Penticton Bees won the 1954 Allen Cup with Bob and his brother Warren cheering them on. Following year, the Penticton Bees would represent Canada in West Germany for the 1955 World Ice Hockey Championships and win. Bob started the 57-58 season with the Max in Summerland. Around New Year's '58, Mickey McDowell of Vernon and Bob would go to Regina for a tryout with the Pats of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Bob would be turning 20 in March of '58, which would make him only available for the current season. That season, the Pats were rebuilding, which meant younger players. At the time, Mickey was 17, so he was young enough and skilled enough to make the cut. Mickey pleaded with the Pats coach, Brent Mario, to find a place on the Pats roster for Bob, as he'd been a terrific goal scorer back home. Mario phoned Ken Ulyott, the coach of the Prince Albert Mintos, and asked him if he could use a goal scorer. Ulyott said, "Why not?" and took him. On January 6, 1958, Bob Parker dressed for his first game in the SJHL for the Prince Albert Mintos against last season's Memorial Cup champion, Flin Flon Bombers. On the opening faceoff, Bob was on right wing with brothers Chick and Dave Ballone at center and left wing. Playing for the Bombers were the soon-to-be NHLers Dwayne Rupp and Cliff Pennington. Bob would get a goal and an assist in his first game with the Mintos in a 4-2 loss. The Saskatchewan Junior Quakers of the SJHL were coached by the Dipsy Doodle dandy from Delisle, Saskatchewan, Max Bentley. Cliff Schmotz and Ed Van Imp were two local Saskatoon boys playing for the Junior Quakers, who would also enjoy NHL careers. Playing against the Regina Pats, Bob would share the score sheet with the Pats' Red Berenson. Bob scored the first Mintos goal of the game off a neat pass from Marshall Johnson. In the third period, a sizzling backhand shot by Bill Hickey hit Mintos goalie Ken Kuntz over the left eye, and the game was delayed for 25 minutes as he was stitched up. That was those old-time goalies. The Mintos would play under international rules for a game against the Melville Millionaires. The Mintos would beat the Millionaires 10-1 in Prince Albert. The Millionaires' tough guy John Ferguson was lining up against Bob Parker on the Mintos' right side. Bob would have to mind his P's and Q's tonight. The Mintos had an edge in play because they had already played 4 games against U.S. colleges and play under international rules. Bob scored 2 goals against Melville. Don Ferguson got the only assist on Melville's goal in the 3rd period. Fergie also received 2 minor penalties in the 3rd. Thinking maybe Bob pissed him off after all. Pretty sure he could chirp. Bob started the 58-59 hockey season with the senior trail Smoke Eaters alongside many of the players who would represent Canada at the 1961 World Ice Hockey Championship. Partway through the season, Trail would start an intermediate Smoke Eaters hockey team, and I suspect Bob was asked to play for it. Instead, Bob decided to return home to play with his intermediate Summerland Max and the senior Penticton Bees. A warm bed and mom's home cooking was a much better option for a 20-year-old at Smoky Trail. Friday the 13th, February 59, 2 local youngsters were dressed in the V-strip for a game against Fred Sasakamoose and the Kamloops Chiefs. Larry Lund of the Penticton Juveniles and Bob Parker of the Summerland Juniors didn't set the world on fire, but they did well for their first time in an Okanagan Senior Hockey League game. Parker would get an assist in the game. Larry Lund and Larry Hale, who Bob played baseball with, started the Okanagan Hockey School, which my brother and I got to attend as pre-teens. It was really cool. We got, from the Vancouver Canucks, we got Wayne Mackey's autograph and Cesar Maniego from the North Stars. At the end of the 59-60 season, Bob received a letter inviting him to try out for the 60-61 Vs. Bob declined Penticton's offer after he had a serious conversation with his dad. In that chat, his dad, Victor, pointed out to Bob and his brother, Warren, that they were playing a lot of baseball and a lot of hockey and not doing a lot of school. Now, my grandpa was a reasonable father, so he gave his boys a couple of options. In no uncertain terms, the options were my way, highway. Perhaps some of you know a father or grandfather has had that same perspective. I know my grandpa passed it on to my dad. Brother Warren opted for my way and went to work for his dad at Parker Construction driving machinery. Bob chose the highway and enrolled at UBC. Bob had worked for his dad on many occasions driving equipment, and after seeing some old guy around 40 driving a grader day after day after day after day, he swore to himself he would never be an old guy like that doing a job like that for the rest of his life. It also didn't hurt that my mom was already enrolled at UBC. Gail Cromie had skipped the grade, graduated a year early from Summerland High School, and already had a year towards her Bachelor of Arts degree at UBC when Bob enrolled. Good thing Bob went to grade 13 at Penticton High to give him enough credits to apply. In his first year at UBC, 60-61, Bob would play for their head coach, Al Brush Stewart. Brush was a high school teacher during the day and UBC's hockey coach in the evenings. He'd earned his nickname due to his out-of-date, ultra-conservative hairstyle. During UBC's Christmas break, Bob married Gail Cromie on December 29th, 1960 in Summerland. They had their first child, July 61. You do the math. The UBC Thunderbirds started the 60-61 season like gangbusters by beating Montana State University 9-1 and 15-7. Chris Barney of the UBC school newspaper reported that in the second game, 4 of the victors' 15 goals were scored by a slight dipsy doodling center named Bob Parker, who looks more like a ballet dancer than a hockey player. After falling to defeat to the University of Saskatchewan Huskies 11-2 on Friday, January 20th, 61, the Thunderbirds went on to beat the Huskies 5-2 on Saturday in games played in Saskatoon. Unfortunately, that would be the T-Birds' first and last victory of the season. Bob was under a lot of academic pressure in his first year, and he was not a naturally gifted student. Bob would be scholastically ineligible for the last 2 games of the season, which included the annual Amber Cup. The Alberta Golden Bears would win their 10th straight Amber Cup in 11 tries with a goal differential of 23-6. UBC won the first Amber Cup in 1950. I talked with Bob's friend and UBC teammate, Gary Boone Struther, about Bob, and he stated that your dad was a pretty straight arrow, didn't get into much trouble. And then he chuckled and said, except for this one time. Apparently, Brush had advertised in the UBC that an exhibition game between the UBC Thunderbirds and the professional Seattle Totems of the Western Hockey League was scheduled to be played. The only problem was nobody had told the Seattle Totems. So Brush divided his UBC players into 2 teams, gave one group white jerseys and the other group green ones. Presto, the Seattle Totems appeared. The game was a bit of a laugh, so unbeknownst to Bob's T-Bird teammates, and Boone's pseudo totem teammates. Boys started what looked like a real Donnybrook. The friends were throwing haymakers that didn't connect, lots of body blows with no impact, and they were howling with laughter as their teammates finally tore them apart. Boone still swear he won the fight. Bob would lead the team in scoring alongside sharpshooter Johnny Utendale. Utendale attended a few camps with the Detroit Red Wings, skating with the likes of Gordie Howe and Alex Levecchio and Red Kelly. When I talked with Boone Strother, he told me a story that Utendale had told him one day at practice. While trying out for the Red Wings, Utendale was lined up on the wing for a face-off against Gordie Howe. Howe whacked Johnny really hard across the shins just before the puck was dropped. When Utendale looked up toward Howe in belief, Mr. Hockey says to him, "That's for nothing. Don't do nothing." Johnny Utendale was an assistant training coach with the U.S. Olympic team in 1980, becoming the first black member of the coaching staff of the men's hockey team. The U.S. Olympic hockey team won the gold at the Miracle on Ice during the Lake Placid. March 12, 1961, the Trail Smoke Eaters, with many of Bob's former teammates, won the World Ice Hockey Championship in Geneva, Switzerland. Tragedy would strike in June 61. Bob's dad, Vic Parker, and Bob's uncle Lloyd were in Penticton Hospital suffering from severe lacerations and concussions in a float plane crash near Trout Creek. The crash took the life of Bob's 2.5-year-old brother, Eugene, who was on his first plane. 33 days after Vic and Mary's youngest son, Eugene, died tragically, their eldest son, Robert, had his first child. Jackson Brent Parker was born in Summerland, BC. Just a side note, my dad who was playing baseball and trail at the time, always called me Jack. My mom always called me Brent. My dad wanted to name me after old spaghetti legs, Jackie Parker of the CFL fame. My mom was not amused, but today my Okanagan family calls me Jack and everyone else calls me. In 1961, Father Bauer was sent by the Basilian Fathers to St. Mark's College on UBC campus, where he would join the UBC men's hockey coaching staff. Mickey McDowell enrolled at UBC in the fall of 61, but had no intentions of playing for the lame duck Thunderbirds. When Bob ran into Mickey, he suggested to Mick that he could come out to the hockey team as they had a new coach, a guy named Father Bauer, who was pretty good. Bob and Mickey's best friend Boone convinced McDowell to come out to one practice and see. Mickey came out, met Father Bauer, and by the end of the practice, he was convinced he should join the team. Thunderbirds won only 2 exhibition games that season against Gonzaga and Victoria College, lost one to the Chilliwack Steelheads, 10-1. They were winless in all 8 of their league games. Peter Kelly and Bob Parker were the leading scorers for UBC that season. UBC would again lose the Hamburg Cup to University of Alberta with a goal differential of 13-6 for the Golden Bears, which was significantly better than last season's 23-6. Back home in Summerland, the Macs would win the 1961-62 Koi Cup, the senior AA hockey championships champions of BC. In a phone conversation with Mickey McDowell, I was informed by Mickey that your dad was a great player. Your dad was very good on the wall. He played both ends of the rink, back checking and forechecking, up and down the ice all the time. Mickey recalled that your dad was a damn good team player. Thanks, Mickey. UBC opened the 62-63 season by pounding the Chilliwack Steelheads 7-1. Things were starting to look up. In January 63, Father Bauer and the Thunderbirds traveled to the Kootenays to play some exhibition games to help prepare them for their annual Hamburg Cup run. On January 3rd, 63, a game was played between the Trail Smoke Eaters, who would represent Canada at the World Hockey Championships, March 63, and the UBC Thunderbirds, who were the embryo of the 64 Olympic hockey team. After dancing in the 1963 New Year with his very pregnant wife, Gail, in Summerland, Bob would join the rest of the Thunderbirds in trail for the games. On Bobby Hall's 24th birthday, Bob's second son, my brother Mike, born in Summerland, the day of the UBC game versus trail. Mike was the first baby born in Summerland in 63. Mom was again not thrilled that my dad was away playing hockey and trail while she was giving birth to my brother. Back to the game. Both teams, especially the Smokies, had great chances, but for UBC, there was always the defensive wall of Terry O'Malley and Barry McKenzie, and behind them, goalie Ken Broderick. The trio would be named the game's 3 stars. Boone Struthers said it felt like our goalie must have stopped 60 shots. This was a slight exaggeration, as the official stats had Broderick only making 41 saves. The game ended in a 1-1 tie, and Father Bauer was thrilled. UBC would open the regular season with a couple of wins over the Saskatchewan Huskies and Saskatoon. These were followed by a humbling exhibition game against the Western Hockey League's Vancouver Canucks, where the T-Birds were smoked 9-2. Max McNabb, general manager of the Canucks, had offered to play against Father Bowers on the proposals to help Bowers' team tune up to the games. In the third period, there was a fight between UBC forward Ralph Lorte and Canuck goalkeeper Gilles Villemere. Vancouver players charged from the bench to keep Lorte from damaging their goalie. What if Gilles had been injured in the rough and tumble, Max McNabb would say later? What if he'd broken his hand throwing a punch? Lorte, whose nose took a bit of a beating in the hubbub, visited the Vancouver dressing room after the game and apologized to Villemere for the heat of the moment scrap. During the skirmish, Father Bauer kept his players at the bench when the Canucks stormed onto the ice, stopping any further trouble. Thunderbirds would play the Powell River Regals for the Black Ball Trophy in a 2-game home-and-home series. First game was tied 4-4, and UBC would win the second game 9-1 to claim the Black Ball Trophy of the now-defunct Pacific Coast Intermediate Hockey League. In the two games, Bob would score 3 goals. Thunderbirds were in Edmonton on the 8th of February to play the Golden Bears for the first game of the annual Hamburg Cup. Alberta would win the first game in overtime 3-2, with Bob Parker getting one of UBC's goals. In the second game, UBC fought hard to win 3-1 and claim the series by an aggregate score of 5-4 for the first Hamburg Cup since 1950. At the end of the season, UBC had a record of 8 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. They were the 1962-63 Western Canada Intercollegiate Athletic Association champs. 3 days after Bob's 25th birthday, on March 13, 1963, the UBC Thunderbirds men's hockey team boarded an Air Canada flight from Vancouver to Kingston, Ontario, destined for the first ever Canadian Intercollegiate Hockey Championship. Before the opening game of the tournament, Father Bauer managed to get access to Maple Leaf Gardens for practice with his UBC players. It was good to have a coach like Father Bauer with friends in high places, like the clergy from the Toronto Maple Leafs. In the opening game on March 15, 63, Ralph Lorte, Pete Kelly, Mickey McDowell, and Bob Parker scored in the first period for the Thunderbirds, giving them a 4-0 lead over the University of Sherbrooke Verre-Or, green and gold. UBC would coast to an easy victory, 6-2. Both Sherbrooke goals came when UBC was 2 men short. The next day, the Canadian University Championship was on the line between the tournament favorite McMaster Marlins and UBC Thunderbirds. In the second period, the game was tied 1-1 when UBC forward Mike Smith skated to the bench during play. He stopped to kick at a loose puck after his replacement had already left the bench, and UBC was penalized for too many men on the ice. This would prove costly for the Thunderbirds. Just seconds after the ensuing power play began, McMaster scored. Then the Marlins scored again to make it 3-1. UBC's Peter Kelly drilled a 20-footer home on a pass from Terry O'Malley before the second period ended. The Thunderbirds pressed throughout the third, but McMaster constantly iced the puck, which prevented UBC from scoring or mounting any sort of cohesive attack. In the final period, UBC goalie Ken Broderick was brilliant as the Marlins, with UBC playing every man up, got loose on several occasions for breakaways. The Thunderbirds barraged the Marlins goalie Jim Cannon with scoring opportunities, but the Marlins keeper stood on his head and shut the door. My dad would say he couldn't believe that we couldn't get one by him in the third. The Marlins edged the T-Birds 3-2 and won the first Canadian Intercollegiate Hockey Championship. The 1962-63 UBC Thunderbirds would win the Black Ball Trophy, the Hamburg Cup, the Western Canada Intercollegiate Athletic Association title, and finish a close second in the Canadian Intercollegiate Hockey Championships. This would be my dad's favorite season. Father Bauer and the 1962-63 UBC team were inducted into the UBC Thunderbirds Hall of Fame in 2012, a few years after my dad died. He would have been very, extremely proud. Okay, thanks for listening. Any questions?
Sorry, so one request was, do you intend on updating was your grandfather, sorry, your dad's hockey profile in the SIRH database?
I certainly hope to.
It doesn't have as much detail as you gave us.
No, I'm sure.
This merged, there were 2 Bob Parkers, and
Right.
based on what you said, I was able to tell the 2 of them belong together. So while you were talking, I merged the 2 profiles. And I put 39 as the year of birth. Is that right? 38. All right. And then 2010, I think, is when he died. So we'll have to get exact dates from you and everything, but awesome. Cool. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Got some programs here if anybody's interested
Oh,
in
cool.
looking at them.
You wouldn't that?
Count them. Count them before you hand them out.
What year did you play for the junior grade?
Was he on the, Max Bentley, that was his first, one of the years was his first year coaching, and his team went 1-46, 1-56.
Well,
So they were probably one of the worst records ever in junior hockey.
I think Max and his brother Doug, buying the
Yeah.
reviving. That's.
I had a question about the length of the season. I seem to recall you saying one year UBC's record was based on 12 games played or something like.
Based on 8 games played. They had
So
8
was that the actual season? It seems like a very short season. Was that typical for university hockey in those days?
Played every team twice.
And that was it? Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, they played exhibitions, they played against the Canucks.
Yeah, so some comments about that time period is firstly, one of the founders of SIR, a gentleman by the name of Ed Grenda, played at UBC at about exactly that time period. So I'll mention it to him. Secondly, the reason that McMaster was so strong is that McMaster had a 1-year physical education training program. So they got a lot of athletes that came from several junior teams in order to attend MAC for the first year.
Excellent. Any other questions?
What did he have to say about Father Bauer?
My dad didn't brag very much. He didn't, I wish I'd asked him more stories when he was alive, but Father Bauer was a really big influence on him, and I think on the rest of the players. I was lucky enough to have my dad coach me 1 year. He made it fun. We didn't have a good team, but he got everybody to play. He got everybody encouraged, tried to motivate them. And he had a lot of good things to say about his way of doing that. He didn't come into the dressing room and yell and scream at players, tell them they're doing fine. He encouraged them, help them. He'd teach them how to play aggressively, which was good.